Jake Bennett stared at his reflection in the curved window of Orbital Station 7, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. As the station's lead maintenance technician, he'd seen this view countless times, but it never ceased to amaze him. The peaceful blue marble below stood in stark contrast to the chaos currently unfolding aboard the station. "Bennett. We need you in Docking Bay 3 immediately." His supervisor's voice crackled through his earpiece. "The diplomatic delegation arrives in 30 minutes, and the atmospheric regulators are acting up again." Jake sighed, gathering his tools. The station had been in an uproar for weeks preparing for this mysterious diplomatic event. Nobody seemed to know exactly who was coming or why, but the brass had made it clear that everything needed to be perfect. In Docking Bay 3, Jake found the problem quickly enough, a faulty connection in the regulator's main control panel. As he worked, the bay's massive doors began to cycle open. He looked up, startled. The delegation wasn't due for another 20 minutes. "Control, this is Bennett in Bay 3. We've got an early arrival." His words died in his throat as the ship came into view. It was like nothing he'd ever seen before, a sleek, silver vessel that seemed to bend light around it, moving with impossible grace. The ship's hull sparkled with an iridescent sheen that reminded him of mother of pearl. Before he could move, a beam of light shot down from the ship, materializing into a group of tall, elegant figures. Their clothing seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and their skin had a subtle, silvery sheen. But it was their leader who captured Jake's full attention. She stood taller than the others, with long, silver-white hair that floated around her as if suspended in water. Her eyes were the color of distant stars, a deep, mesmerizing purple that seemed to hold entire galaxies. When those eyes met his, Jake felt the air leave his lungs. "You are not part of the welcoming committee," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made his spine tingle. Jake realized he was still holding his wrench and probably looked like a mess in his maintenance jumpsuit. "No, I'm just the technician. I was fixing the atmospheric regulators." He gestured vaguely at the panel behind him. To his surprise, she smiled. "A keeper of machines. How fascinating." She glided closer, her movements impossibly graceful. "I am Queen Astera of the Lyrian Empire." "And you are?" "Jake." "Jake Bennett," he managed, wondering why the actual welcoming committee hadn't arrived yet. "Tell me, Jake Bennett, do you believe in destiny?" She reached out, touching the control panel he'd been working on. The displays suddenly blazed to life, systems activating perfectly despite his repairs being incomplete. I believe in keeping things running," he said, watching in amazement as the machinery hummed to life. "How did you do that?" "The universe speaks in many languages, including that of machines." Her smile deepened. "Perhaps you would join us for the reception? I find myself curious about your work." Before Jake could respond, the bay doors burst open and a flood of officials rushed in, profusely apologizing for their tardiness. In the confusion, Jake found himself swept along with the group, still clutching his wrench, as Queen Astera insisted he accompany them. As they walked through the station's corridors, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change dramatically. He noticed the Queen kept glancing his way, a knowing look in her star-filled eyes. Whatever was happening, he had a feeling this was more than just a diplomatic visit. The reception was held in the station's largest observation deck, with Earth providing a stunning backdrop through the panoramic windows. Jake stood awkwardly near the refreshments, feeling out of place among the dignitaries in their formal attire. He'd tried to excuse himself several times, but Queen Astera had politely insisted he stay, even sending one of her attendants to bring him a drink that tasted like liquid starlight. As the evening wore on, Jake found himself drawn into increasingly frequent conversations with the Queen. She asked him about Earth's technology, about his work on the station, and about his life. Her questions were sharp and insightful, and her genuine interest in his answers made him forget about his shabby appearance and unlikely presence at the event. What Jake didn't notice was the way the Queen's attendants watched their interactions with knowing smiles, or how the very air around them seemed to shimmer when they spoke. He was too captivated by her stories of the Lyrian Empire, of cities that floated among the stars and ships that could traverse galaxies in the blink of an eye. As Earth's light faded from the windows and the station's night cycle began, Jake realized he'd spent hours talking with Queen Astra. She stood close to him now, both of them gazing out at the stars. "There is an old saying among my people," she said softly. "When the stars align, two souls may find each other across the vast expanse of space." She turned to face him, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "I believe, Jake Bennett, that this meeting was not mere chance." Before he could process her words, a soft chime sounded, and the air around them began to glow with a subtle, silvery light. Jake felt a warm tingling sensation spread through his body, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw threads of starlight connecting him to the Queen. What he didn't realize was that this moment would mark the beginning of an adventure beyond his wildest dreams, one that would change not only his life but the fate of two civilizations. Jake woke up in a room that seemed to be made of flowing crystal and starlight. His head throbbed as he tried to piece together the events of the previous night. The reception, his conversations with Queen Astra, the strange glowing light. Everything after that was a blur. A soft chime echoed through the room, and a section of the wall dissolved into an archway. Two tall Lyrians entered, their expressions serious. The first, a woman with midnight blue hair, introduced herself as High Counselor Naira. Her companion, a man with silver markings along his temples, was Minister Theron. "Mr. Bennett," Naira began, her tone carefully measured, "are you aware of what transpired last night?" Jake sat up slowly, noticing his maintenance uniform had been replaced with clothing that seemed to be made from the same flowing material the Lyrians wore. "Not exactly." "Where am I?" "You are aboard the Celestial Crown, Queen Astra's personal vessel," Theron explained. "During your conversation with Her Majesty, you both experienced the stellar resonance." "The what?" "It is an extremely rare phenomenon," Naira continued. "When two souls are perfectly matched, the ancient magics of our people recognize this harmony. Last night, the resonance enacted a binding ceremony between you and Queen Astra." Jake's mind struggled to process her words. "A binding ceremony? You mean like marriage, in your terms," Theron confirmed. "Though it goes far deeper than your Earth customs. The stellar resonance hasn't occurred in over 3 centuries. Jake stood up abruptly, his head spinning. "There has to be some mistake. I'm just a maintenance technician. I can't be married to a queen." "The resonance does not make mistakes," Naira said firmly. "It sees beyond titles and status to the very essence of beings. You and Queen Astra are now bound by laws older than our civilization." Before Jake could protest further, another chime sounded. This time, Queen Astra herself entered the room. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was even more stunning than he remembered, her presence filling the space with an otherworldly energy. "Leave us," she commanded softly, and her advisors bowed before departing. "Your Majesty," Jake began, but she held up a hand. "Please, call me Astra. We are bound now, after all." She moved closer, and Jake felt that same tingling sensation from the night before. "I understand this must be overwhelming for you." "That's putting it mildly," Jake admitted. "I don't know anything about being royal, or about your culture, or... Yet you understand machines in a way that mirrors how my people comprehend the cosmic forces," she interrupted. "Last night, I watched you repair that regulator. Your intuition with technology is remarkable." "It's just basic engineering," Jake protested. Astra smiled. "Is it? Watch." She gestured to a nearby wall, and a holographic display materialized. "Try to read it." To Jake's astonishment, the flowing alien symbols made perfect sense to him. More than that, he could somehow understand the complex systems they described. How is this possible? The resonance doesn't just bind our lives, it creates a bridge between our abilities, our understanding. She took his hand, and Jake felt a surge of energy flow between them. You can now comprehend our technology as naturally as I do, just as I can now sense the mechanical patterns you see. Jake stared at their joined hands, watching as tiny threads of light danced between them. What happens now? Now, we face a choice, Astra said. While the binding cannot be undone, we can choose how to proceed. I will not force you into a role you don't want. And what about your people? Will they accept a human maintenance tech as their queen's consort? Astra's expression grew serious. There will be challenges. Some will oppose this union. But the resonance is sacred to my people, even the most traditional among them cannot deny its significance. As if to emphasize her words, a low rumble shook the ship. Astra's expression shifted to concern as she glanced at the holographic displays. Speaking of challenges. It seems some are unwilling to wait before testing our union. The displays showed multiple ships appearing out of what looked like tiers in space itself. Their designs were angular and aggressive, completely unlike the elegant Lyrian vessels. The Drachnid Imperium, Astra explained grimly. They've been pushing for an alliance through marriage for decades. They will not take kindly to our unexpected union. Jake looked at the tactical displays, his enhanced understanding allowing him to grasp the severity of the situation. The enemy ships were positioning themselves in an attack formation. I know this is not what you expected when you woke up today, Astra said, her eyes meeting his. But I need to know, will you stand with me? Looking into her star-filled eyes, Jake made his decision. He might not know much about being royal, but he did know about solving problems and facing challenges head-on. Plus, there was something about Astra that made him feel more complete, more capable than he'd ever felt before. I'm with you, he said firmly, squeezing her hand. Though I hope you don't expect me to start wearing a crown. Astra's laugh was like chimes in the wind. Let's focus on surviving our first diplomatic crisis as a couple before we discuss royal accessories. As alert klaxons began to sound throughout the ship, Jake realized his life had indeed changed forever, but maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. The Drachnid ships hung in space like deadly sculptures, their weapons primed and ready. But thanks to Jake's quick thinking and newfound understanding of Lyrian technology, the Celestial Crown had managed to evade their initial attack. Now, 3 days later, he found himself in an even more challenging situation, his first royal court session. The Drachnid Imperium's retreat had proven temporary. A month into his new life as royal consort, Jake found himself in the Celestial Crown's war room, studying holographic displays of enemy movements. The Drachnids had been systematically attacking Lyrian outposts, drawing ever closer to Earth. They're testing the new defense systems, Jake explained to the assembled military council. Each attack follows a different pattern, probing for weaknesses. His fingers danced through the holographic interface, highlighting attack vectors. Astra stood beside him, her presence a constant source of strength through their bond. What troubles me is their patience. The Drachnids are not known for subtle strategies. Because this isn't just about us anymore, Jake realized, the pieces clicking into place. They're after Earth too. Our technology might be primitive compared to yours, but our practical applications, combined with Lyrian advanced systems. He trailed off, seeing understanding dawn in Astra's eyes. They fear what we might become together, she finished his thought. An alert flashed across the displays. Multiple Drachnid vessels had appeared near Mars, their energy signatures masking something larger behind them. By the cosmic void, General Solara breathed. They've brought a world breaker. Jake's enhanced understanding immediately grasped the threat. The massive vessel could literally crack planets, and Earth had no defense against such weapons. But through his connection to Lyrian technology, he sensed something else. "The World Breaker's power core," he said, studying the readings. "It's based on the same principles as your defensive systems, just pushed to destructive extremes. If we could invert the frequency." Astra caught his idea through their bond. "You want to turn their weapon against them? Better." Jake's hands flew over the controls, combining Earth's practical physics with Lyrian energy manipulation. "We can convert it into a shield generator. But we'll need to get close, too close." "I'll lead the assault myself," Astra declared, but Jake shook his head. "We need to go together. The modifications will require both our abilities working in perfect sync." The council erupted in protests about risking both rulers in a single mission, but through their bond, Jake and Astra shared an unspoken understanding. This was about more than just their two civilizations now, it was about proving that unity was stronger than division. Hours later, the Celestial Crown slipped through space toward the World Breaker, cloaked by Jake's modified stealth systems. In the ship's heart, Jake and Astra stood before a specially modified control interface, their hands intertwined. "The Drachnids are hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Let them see," Astra commanded. The view screen activated, revealing the scaled visage of Supreme Warlord Kraz. "So, the human pet and his stolen queen come to witness their world's end." Jake felt Astra's anger flare through their bond, but also her control. They had planned for this. "You mistake unity for theft," Astra replied calmly. "And strength for dominance." Jake reached out with his consciousness, connecting with the World Breaker's systems through their modified interface. The massive weapon had begun powering up, its energy building to planet-shattering levels. "Your primitive human cannot hope to comprehend," Kraz began, but stopped as warnings blared across his command center. Jake smiled. "You'd be surprised what a maintenance technician can figure out." His consciousness, enhanced by the resonance and guided by Astra's knowledge, had already begun rewriting the World Breaker's core protocols. The massive weapon's energy field began to shift, its destructive power inverting into something new. Waves of protective energy pulsed outward, forming an expanding shield that encompassed both Earth and the nearest Lyrian colonies. "Impossible!" Kraz roared. "Our greatest weapon is now the foundation of lasting peace," Astra finished. "The shield will protect both our peoples, powered by the very weapon you meant to destroy us with." Through their bond, Jake felt Astra's love and pride wash over him. Together, they had turned an instrument of destruction into a symbol of protection and unity. The Drachnid fleet, their ultimate weapon now transformed, had no choice but to withdraw. As the enemy ships vanished into hyperspace, Jake turned to his wife. "Not bad for a maintenance technician, huh?" Astra's laugh echoed through their bond. "My love, you've never been just a technician. You've become something far more, a bridge between worlds." The view screens showed Earth and the nearest Lyrian colony, both now bathed in the protective glow of their transformed shield. It was a fitting symbol of what they had built together, proof that the greatest power came not from weapons or technology, but from the union of different worlds and ways of thinking. 1 year after the World Breaker incident, Jake stood in the newly constructed Harmony Spire, a towering structure that connected Earth's first orbital elevator to a Lyrian space dock. Below, the sprawling metropolis of New Alexandria showcased the seamless blend of Earth and Lyrian technology, floating buildings beside conventional skyscrapers, anti-gravity vehicles sharing space with electric cars. "Still can't believe this all started with a faulty atmospheric regulator," Jake mused, feeling Astra's amusement through their bond. "The universe has interesting ways of bringing people together," she replied, her hand finding his. Their connection had grown so strong that they could now share thoughts effortlessly. The diplomatic chamber around them filled with representatives from both worlds. After the Drachnid threat, the alliance between Earth and the Lyrian Empire had flourished. Jake's unique ability to merge practical Earth engineering with advanced Lyrian technology had sparked a renaissance of innovation. Lord Vexor, once their strongest critic, now served as the head of the Joint Technological Development Council. "The latest quantum communication network is ready," he announced. "Thanks to Consort Jake's modifications, we can now maintain instant communication across the entire alliance." Through their bond, Jake sensed something else occupying Astra's thoughts. She had been holding onto a secret, waiting for the right moment. As the meeting concluded, she turned to him with stars dancing in her eyes. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly. "Our bond, it's created something unprecedented." She guided his hand to her abdomen, and through their connection, Jake felt it, a tiny spark of life, pulsing with both human and Lyrian energy. "We're going to have," he whispered, amazed. "The first child of both worlds," she confirmed. "The healers say the resonance made it possible, adapting our biologies to be compatible." The news spread quickly, becoming a symbol of hope for both civilizations. The child would be living proof that their differences could create something beautiful rather than divide them. The Drachnids, watching from the shadows, finally accepted the futility of their opposition. Their empire had begun to fragment as more worlds sought alliance with the Earth-Lyrian partnership, attracted by its promise of mutual growth and respect. 6 months later, Jake and Astra stood in the Palace of Stellar Harmony's medical chamber, holding their newborn daughter. Her tiny hands glowed with soft light, and the room's energy patterns danced in response to her presence. She had Jake's eyes but Astra's silvery hair, and the ability to interface with both traditional technology and Lyrian systems. "She's perfect," Jake whispered, feeling overwhelming love flow through their bond. "She's the future," Astra replied. "Living proof that the greatest achievements come not from conquest or dominance, but from union and understanding." As their daughter opened her eyes for the first time, the energy patterns across every Lyrian building on Earth and in space shifted, forming a new, harmonious pattern never seen before. It was as if both worlds were celebrating this new chapter in their shared history. Jake thought back to that night in the space station, when a simple repair job had led him to his destiny. He had gained so much: a wife he loved deeply, a child who represented hope for 2 civilizations, and the ability to make a real difference in the universe. "I need to make one small adjustment to the medical bay systems," he said with a smile, reaching out with his consciousness to fine-tune the environmental controls for their daughter's comfort. Astra laughed softly. "Once a maintenance technician, always a maintenance technician. But now I maintain the balance between worlds," he replied, holding his family close as their bond filled with shared joy and love. Their daughter cooed, and across 2 worlds, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, celebrating the union of Earth and Lyrian ingenuity, of practical knowledge and advanced wisdom, of maintenance technician and queen, a union that had changed the course of 2 civilizations forever.